is live. This is Ron Coddington. Hey, this is Ron Coddington from Military Images Live. We are here with a brand new episode of Military Images. Joining you from Arlington, Virginia this evening, and so happy to have you join us. We've got folks coming on, so we'll give our traditional couple minutes to welcome everyone. I see Doug York is in the house, Kevin Canberg, Rick Wolf is here, Doug Sagrillo, Michael Hardy. Evening, sir. How are you doing? More folks are coming on, and while that's happening, I'll take a moment to mention Ben Pauley and Soldier Collectibles. Ben has been an advertiser in Military Images for, more than a year now. And he's got some great images for sale and other items on his website, Soldier Collectibles. I encourage you to stop by for a visit and see what's going on over there, and drop Ben a line if there are any images or other items that capture your attention. So Gilbert Sorrell is here. How's it going, sir? How are you doing? More folks coming on. I'll do a quick look here. Let's see who else is here. Kyle Stetz. Hey, Kyle. Jeff. My mother is here. How are you doing, Mom? Anthony is here. How's it going? Glad to see everybody coming along. And while we are waiting for a couple more folks to come on, I'm going to mention one of our subscribers this evening who deserves a mention. Say hello to Merlin. Here's Merlin, the Chihuahua. He is guarding his copy of Military Images, and I think he just finished reading the issue, according to his father, Jerry Gorman. And I would not try to take away Merlin's copy of Military Images. As you can see, he's pretty possessive about it. So if you're feeling possessive about your copies of Military Images, I urge you to renew when your renewal comes up. Or if you're not a subscriber, I would think about taking a lesson from our good friend Merlin here. Clearly, it means a lot to him. So give Military Images a try. So more folks coming on. Charles Darden is here. Fred's here. I want to mention Fred, actually, before we get to tonight's first story. Fred is going to be the guest on Caretakers, our new episode, which is coming up next Saturday. And it will be, I believe, episode 7. And Fred is going to be talking about his Tar Heel project. So look forward to that. It is a Caretakers will be coming to you live next Saturday at 6:30 ET. And that is brought to you by Military Images, by Civil War Faces, and the Civil War Photo Collectors Society. Fred, glad you're here, and look forward to your program on Saturday. So I want to start tonight's first segment. It's called From Liberia to Antietam. And this follows what I've been doing for the last few episodes, which is to highlight someone in the medical profession. And with all of the coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic that's still with us, been paying tribute to nurses from the Civil War period and honoring their service. And tonight, I wanted to take a look at a doctor. So this is the story From Liberia to Antietam. And here is Dr. William Proby Young, who served with the 4th Georgia Infantry. And Dr. Young was originally from Portsmouth, Virginia. And I'll get to a little bit to tell you how he became with the 4th Georgia. But I can tell you that Dr. Young was at Antietam with his regiment in September of 1862. And reportedly, while the shot and shell falling all around, Dr. Young, Surgeon Young, would not leave the men who were injured and wounded. He stayed with them, and he was captured with those who couldn't make it off of the battlefield in time. A historian would later say about Dr. He was truly a brave man and never hesitated to go into the hottest fire on the field of battle in the discharge of duty. It's quite an honor for a surgeon who was pretty much up close front lines, taking care of the men in his command who had been shot, wounded by shell fragments, or otherwise injured during the course of the fighting. Dr. Young is sort of had an interesting early career before the Civil War. As I mentioned, he was a native of Portsmouth, Virginia. And like many men, young men of wealth, he was able to travel and go to school. He went to Jefferson Medical College in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In the late 1850s, got his degree, stayed behind, and went to work in a hospital for, today it would be a psychiatric hospital. Back then it was called a government hospital for the insane. He was there for a while, and an opportunity came up for him to accompany an expedition that was a ship, a captain, a crew, and hundreds of former slaves who were headed to make a new life in Liberia. And Dr. Young signed on to this expedition to basically take care of the crew and all the men, women, and children who were headed to Africa for this journey. He was definitely a ship's doctor. An interesting note says that he didn't really agree with the principles of the mission. He didn't agree with the goals of the mission, but he did go and did perform the duties of ship's doctor. That summer, while he was en route to the African coast, July 4th passed, July 4th, 1860, off of Key West, Florida. And Dr. Young, who kept a journal, had this to say about July 4th. He says, "And this is the glorious 4th, the day in which every American rejoices in his nativity and expends his patriotism in the discharge of fireworks and spreadable speeches. Nothing about our ship gives evidence of the occasion. The captain has hoisted the star. The captain says he don't think any more of the 4th of July than any other day at sea. I'd write up my banner if it was full of holes and didn't show but one star. The idea of letting the 4th pass without the least notice is really painful." That's Dr. Young speaking. And yet, a year later, after the war began, Dr. Young, like many folks from Virginia and other southern states seceded from the Union, went home to serve state. He went to Richmond, and in Richmond, looking for a command, looking to be part of something in the military, received a commission as an assistant surgeon, assignment to the 4th Georgia, who was in need of a surgeon. So he wound up with the 4th, and that's how he got to Antietam later in 1862. And he wound up being in prison, was in Baltimore for a few months. And those of you who recall a discourse that I had a couple weeks ago about a Union doctor who was captured by the Confederates and placed in prison, and received a lot of notes about that. People were upset and surprised that the Confederate Army would hold a Union doctor. We also had a similar case with the Union chaplain. So same case here. The Union holds this doctor and kept him in prison for a couple of months. So Dr. Young eventually returns to his command, and to credit, he is with the rest of the war and is one of that few number of men to surrender at Appomattox. After the war, he settles in Washington, D.C., and is appreciated very much by the folks there. And there's a nice note about him. It says, Dr. Young is an intelligent and refined gentleman, fond of friends as well as a good joke. He has a sunny and pleasant disposition and seems to always be in good humor with himself and the rest of mankind. So that's Dr. Young, seemingly unaffected by his war experience and his experiences before then. He lived a good long life. In 1912 at about age 78. So there's Dr. William Proby Young, who took care of freed slaves and a ship's crew heading to Liberia in the summer of 1860. Took care of Confederate soldiers in his command, the 4th Georgia Infantry, during the Civil War. And then afterwards, took care of his clientele in Washington, D.C. So here you go. Dr. William Proby Young, 4th Georgia. I'm going to take a look here. This one is called Photo Mailer. This comes from one of the unsung heroes of Military Images magazine, Mr. Jack Huroff. I say unsung hero because Jack is a copy editor. He's the man who keeps the magazine, along with Chuck Myers, error-free. Jack is a amazing proofer. He got the eagle eye, catches a lot of details. So a lot of details that I miss. So big thanks to Jack for all that he does. Jack also sent me this document that reminded me of all of the times that I've gone out shopping to stores or been on vacation. I bring home a bag and have some souvenirs in it. And sometimes I'll save those bags and put stuff in a box and forget about them for years. This here is a envelope that held cabinet card photographs. Perhaps you've seen them. They're pretty rare. I've seen a few of them for cartes de visite, but here's one for cabinet cards. I honestly don't think I've seen one for cabinet cards, but Jack brought this to my attention. Ground floor gallery. Let me see. This is the New York gallery, 2 skylights. You can get fine cabinet photos, 99 cents a dozen. It's got a canceled stamp, a canceled mark over a stamp, an address in Berks County, Pennsylvania, to whom it was sent. And Jack did some nice photo sleuthing. Aside from the rarity of this type of envelope, the stamp caught his attention. You can make out pretty much the top half of it. And he did a little bit of work here to find out that this is one of those 4-cent Andrew Jackson stamps. And Jack has determined that these were used from on photo envelopes like this from July 1st of 1885, from October of 1883 to June of 1880, and that was for a 1-ounce size. It was a 2-ounce size stamp that was used, the same 4-cent stamp, from July of 1885 to November of 1888. So Jack's theory, this cabinet card holder was used in dates somewhere between 1883 and 1888. 1888, maybe as late as 1890, when stamp came in and replaced Andy Jackson stamp. So some nice work there by Jack on a fairly rare piece, this envelope for cabinet cards. It occurs to me, I didn't ask Jack if there are any cabinet cards inside. I think maybe there were not. He might have mentioned that detail to me. But a nice piece of a nice relic connected to photography. Thank you, Jack. The next bit of information here is comes as a result of a question from Scott Whitcomb, and he's looked at the magazine and he's pretty amazed, to be honest with you, the quality of the images. And I've heard that from many subscribers about the image quality and how we get the images to be the way they are. And I got to give some credit to our printer, Chromographics. They're located in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. They're a fantastic bunch over there. They have worked for the Smithsonian, and I hired them to do the work for the magazine. So I'm incredibly impressed with the quality. And I know that all of you are like me. You've got you want to see great images looking their best. And so Chromographics does that with their printing. But before we send before they can do their job of the printing, we have to send them the images that are basically the term that they would use in the pre-digital age. And so I want to spend just a couple minutes answering Scott's question. And I'm going to set this up for you and show you, I'm going to explain how we do it. If you all like this, if you're interested to learn more, let me know. And I'll do an actual demo at some point and show you the process. So to give you the full explanation, if you think about digital age, if you went to one of the shows, Gettysburg show, for example, let's say back in the 80s, the 90s, Harry Roach, the founding editor, would be there, and he'd have a setup like this. You'd have a stand with a 35 millimeter camera dangling over it. There would be a piece of cardboard down here, and the photographs would lay on top of this board. There'd be some lights, usually a couple lights, one on either side, and then Harry would focus the lens and click the button, and boom, he would take a photograph of your photograph, and then it would be developed and published in the magazine. So lights, camera, action in today's world is scanner Photoshop action. So the scanner is really the camera. It's the 35 millimeter camera of 2020. My scanner of choice is the Epson V600. This is professional grade product at commercial prices that are affordable, or as affordable as scanners can be. We're looking at a couple $100, which is incredibly cheap compared to what you would pay 15, 20 years ago. So this really is the camera. And what the clicking of the button did in the pre-digital world, the scanner does. You put the image on the screen, you use your settings to get a high resolution image, you hit the button to do the scan. Hitting that button to do the scan is the same thing as clicking the button on the camera. Now, the difference here is the lighting. There's no lights really. You have a scanning device inside, and you have a light that lights up to help that scanning wand as it moves across the screen. But you don't have the benefit of those really nice lights on either side of the camera that Harry Roach used to have, and perhaps some of you that have those kinds of setups and still may use them. So the lights are really done in Photoshop. And to give you an example, here's an image that I scanned. I believe this was at the Dalton show. Pardon me. This is the Brad Birch from the Brad Birch collection. It's a wonderful image. is, I believe, a Teamster. I showed it on the show a couple of episodes ago. I believe it's a Teamster, Corinth, Mississippi. He's holding a whip. There's some etching side of it of that image. And this is like after the scan. So we've basically captured all the information in the scan, but notice how dark the surface. This is what all the scans look like that I make. They always have this dark surface, particularly the hard plate images. Cartes de visite and albumins, they tend to darken and yellow a little bit, but it's particularly the case in hard images. Now, what I do in Photoshop is using, there's a certain drawing tool called the pen tool. I actually make I draw around the edges of the area where the image is. And here is that the image area, think about it for a second. If it's an ambrotype, it's glass, right? If it's a tintype, it's on iron. The material, the glass or the iron, is very different from the matte and the frame that's around it. The matte is made of brass. The frame has that gutta percha type material. And so they react to light in different ways. So just call the whole scan into Photoshop and try to mess with the lighting and adjust it a little bit. It adjusts everything, the image, the plate, and what you tend to get is a mess. I never really get the image light enough. So by separating the image from the rest of the frame, I can now apply some filters directly to only image area. And so I'm going to show you, I'm going to put it back so you can see in the frame. But at this point, I'm actually adjusting the image itself, just the image area. And because I have a background and connection to photojournalism, and because I want to not manipulate the image in any way, I use the classic photojournalism techniques. And so that's basically adjusting the contrast and adjusting the color. And the color is the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black fields. And so you can see right away, here is the adjustments that are made for contrast. And boom, you can see a huge difference. Now, if I adjust for color, this may be, I think you can see this here. If I adjust for color, you can see that it begins to go away. It goes away entirely almost. And you can see the wonderful red tinting and the gold highlights that are added to the whip. So this basically, the Photoshop adjustments, color. The scanner is clicking the camera button, and Photoshop is adding those two lights on either side of the camera. So that's the drill. Again, let me know if this is interesting to you guys and you want to know more. I'm happy. I can do a demo. I can share my screen and show you actually how I do it. So that's that. I've got one more segment for tonight. This is the research rabbit hole. And I'm going to start with the which is a pretty interesting photograph. It's a man who is sitting in some space that includes a work table, some cylindrical object, a bunch of metal supports around it. It's a carte de visite, and it's an unusual environment that he's seated in. This is something. So the back of the image is Belen Hall Photographers in Washington, D.C. There's a single name that's written up here in the upper corner, and it's in pencil, dark pencil, period, and it says Gulick, G-U-L-I-C-K. Now, if you take a close detail of it and get a look at this table, there's a stereo viewer, there's a pair of field glasses, there is a tray with what appears to be a bunch of photographs that stack to ports. There's another, not an engraving, but some sort of sign perhaps attached to another support. The man himself, it looks like an older man. I see some white streaks in his beard, or gray streaks. He's holding a book that's open. His hat's in sort of a shelf, and then on top of the shelf is what appears to be wood boxes that held negative plates. So something is going on photographing. Related to photography. So a man who's sitting in some environment that looks like a construction environment. There's a bunch of photo supply on top of it. Now, thanks to my friends at the New York Public Library, they've got a very nice bio who seem to be related. They definitely are related to Belen Hall, the back mark on the photographer. Belen Hall existed in 6 to 1867, and they were originally Bell and Brothers became Belen Hall. So now we have a date, an approximate date around 1866 or so, and the back of Bell and Hall. So I live, as I mentioned, in Arlington, Virginia at the beginning of the show. So our offices are non-coronavirus world down to Washington, D.C., which is just a few miles away. And my mind instantly went to thinking, what buildings do I know? What has that kind of metal structure to it? And I thought, it's the old Aqueduct, which have been replaced, but there's some pieces of it that are left. And the old Aqueduct in D.C. is a beautiful, beautiful bridge. And close, you can see all the supports inside of it. And wow, it looks like it could be that structure. And but the more I looked at images of the aqueduct, I thought, it looks like it, but those metal supports aren't quite the same. And it was really, I couldn't fix it all out. So I thought, I need to do what I normally do. When my brain has stopped working, I go out for a run. Clear my head, forget about everything. Let all the facts, let everything I know, let all the anecdotes, let all that filter through. I go for a run, and as I'm ending my run, 3/4 of the way through, lightning bolt strikes. Oh my gosh, I know where I've seen that structure, that infrastructure. The Capitol. If you look up here, this structure is what came into my mind. Now, interestingly, the predecessors to Belen Hall, Belen Brothers, photographed the Capitol. We know that thanks to heritage auctions and a photograph they had. There may be more Belen Hall photos of the Capitol, but we know at least in 1864, which is the date on this photograph, that Bell and Brothers photographed the Capitol. Now, if you go for the architect of the Capitol, you'll find among the many photos this image. It looks familiar. Now, if you put this next to it, and if you factor in these in the lens, the kind of flattish lens of the 1860s, and the more three-dimensional lens that looks awfully. So I'm feeling pretty good about this, but I want more information. I'm thinking, all right, I got the photographer. I've been able to place this in Washington, D.C. This infrastructure, it looks like we're inside the dome of the Capitol, and we need more information. And that's where Gulick comes in. And now I'm beginning to obsess about who is Gulick. I want to know who this guy is. So I begin to search on 4 hours gone. So I find this book, Secret Service Stories Told 50 Years After. Now, on one of the pages is a reference to a JP Gulick. It's an unusual name, JP Gulick, and it identifies him as Mr. JP Gulick on the Capitol grounds. The U.S. Capitol grounds. And he saw something and filed a report, a potential Confederate, I think a black market dealer. This dates from 1864. Now, the next book is Officers and Agents involved in Civil, Military, and Naval Service of the United States. If you go into this book, you're going to find our friend JP Gulick. He's also listed down here. Only now we know his first name. It's John P. Gulick, and we've got some other information here. He was born in Pennsylvania, and he was appointed from Virginia. The post that he was is one of 2 watchmen of the grounds of the U.S. Capitol. So now I have a second reference to him being on the grounds of the Capitol. I can't put him in the Capitol, but I can put him on the grounds of the Capitol. Once more, or in addition, we know he was born in Pennsylvania and lived at the time of his appointment in 1864, 1865. Now let's flash forward to 1869 in the an Appletons Handbook of Travel. Page in that book, we have a quote here of the folks who were patrolling the Capitol, who are inside the Capitol, and here we have J.P. Gulick, who is he's the guy on patrol around the arts and sciences section of the dome. All of the statues now part of the dome involve Mr. J.P. Gulick. So now in the dome. I can't place him in the top part of the dome, but he's a guy that's on patrol in the dome. Now, a little genealogical work on Ancestry.com reveals a John Patterson Gulick, John P. Gulick, J.P. Gulick, born in Pennsylvania, moved to Virginia, and then he goes back to Pennsylvania at some point, and then he winds up in Iowa. So that's a pretty promising lead. Moreover, we know that he was born in 18 and he died around 1895. So that made him in his mid-50s during the Civil War. Now remember the guy, sort of the gray streaked beard. Book that you'll find of you know these books. They were published. They're ubiquitous. Literally every county in the United States in the late 1880s had these books. They are histories of the counties and biographies of its prominent citizens. Well, this is the one for several counties in Iowa. And guess what? It includes a bio of John P. Gulick, and it details his birth in Pennsylvania, living in Virginia. It mentions his time spent in Washington. It mentions involvement in the capture of John Wilkes Booth with the 16th New York Cavalry, and then his eventual move west, Iowa. That's great because it connects together a bunch of dots. What's even better is the portrait of Mr. and Mrs. Gulick. Here is John. Note the beard, note the hair. Now go back to our photograph. Boom. There he is. So I can say with a degree of certainty that Officer Gulick, at least my thinking is that he may have escorted photographers up to the Capitol Dome where they laid out their supplies or maybe take some. And Officer Gulick was maybe kind of as a prop to test the cameras, or maybe kindly Belen Hall photographers said, hey, escorted us up here, let's take your photograph. So this is a current theory, architect of the Capitol, because I review the image and the ironwork then there. So 89.9% sure that what we're looking at here is Officer Gulick inside the dome of the Capitol, the substructure of the Capitol. One more little bit of confirmation, and I think we'll have it. So that's our show for the evening. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you for all the words. I see some demo, so we're definitely going to get that. I think we'll look for that in a future episode. So prepare yourself.